in America. Vice President Mike Pence is in Wisconsin as the 2020 campaign picks up steam. Coronavirus crisis. Lawmakers receive updates on the country's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We're on Capitol Hill. Coming to his defense. Catholic bishops in California react to the destruction of statues of St. Junípero Serra. And unsung heroes. 2 Vatican embassies honor the work done by religious sisters. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump is cracking down on those who tear down statues today. He is strongly reminding protesters that they could be sent to prison for up to 10 years if they engage in such destruction. In fact, the president said today that he will issue an executive order to protect monuments. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports now. Owen?
Tracy, President Trump left the White House for Arizona today to check out the border wall being built and discuss border security, I should say. And before he left, he issued a very stern warning. President Donald Trump issuing a warning to those who would tear down monuments.
They're bad people. They don't love our country, and they're not taking down our monuments. I just want to make that clear.
Just last night, across the street.
Last night, we stopped an attack on a great monument, the monument of Andrew Jackson in Lafayette Park.
And the punishment?
We are looking at long-term jail sentences for these vandals and these hoodlums and these anarchists and agitators, and call them whatever you want. Some people don't like that language, but that's what they are.
Meanwhile, in Georgia, the funeral for Rayshard Brooks, killed in a confrontation with police.
We are the incarceration capital of the world, and I submit that as long as we are committed to this problem of mass incarceration, we'll continue to see these escalations on the street, which literally lead to death.
Shortly after the president flew off on Marine One Tuesday morning, law enforcement moved protesters off the streets near the White House. And in the battle for the White House, former President Barack Obama holds an online fundraiser Tuesday night for Democrat Joe Biden, expected to raise millions.
You know, the Bible says iron sharpens iron.
And in Wisconsin, Vice President Mike Pence talking school choice, announcing education freedom scholarships.
We believe the competition makes everybody better.
Also in Wisconsin, Vice President Pence kicked off his Faith in America tour. He told a crowd of supporters the sweetest words that he ever hears is when he's out and about traveling across the country and people come up to him and tell him that they're praying for him. And he told the crowd there that because of these divided, contentious times that we're living in, that they should pray for all Americans right now. Tracy?
All right. Thank you so much, Owen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Health experts testified today on Capitol Hill. They warn even as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, Americans need to prepare for when the next wave hits and for the next health threat in the future. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, one of the main points, testimony given today is that we are not out of the woods just yet. We are continuing to see a rise in the number of COVID-19 cases in many states across the country. And these doctors want to remind people that we have to continue to wear our masks and keep our social distance. But they also reminded lawmakers that the federal government has to do its part.
CDC has begun to prepare for months ahead when the next season's influenza illness will occur simultaneously, potentially, with COVID-19.
From influenza to Ebola to COVID-19, humans have battled infectious diseases throughout history and will continue to do so. Today, the CDC director calls on Americans to remain vigilant.
The most powerful weapon against this disease are social distancing, face coverings, and hand hygiene. These actions will help us contain transmission.
Experts say the federal government needs to continue to provide adequate funding.
We must not remove the incentives for the biopharmaceutical industry to continue to innovate. It's that innovation that has gotten this far this fast in this particular pandemic.
The FDA says it's using all of its authority to produce a COVID-19 vaccine quickly and safely.
We have not lost sight of our solemn responsibility to the American people to ensure our decisions related to all medical products are based on science and data, and that is a commitment that the American public can have confidence in.
Dr. Anthony Fauci outlines how to beat the virus in places that are seeing a surge of infections.
You have to have the manpower, the system, the testing to identify, isolate, and contact trace in an effective way so that when you see those increases, you can understand where they're coming from and you can do something about them.
Dr. Fauci says that the next few weeks are going to be critical for states like Arizona and Texas and others who have seen an increase. But he also said that we are on the correct path for a vaccine, that we could see it at the end of this year or possibly at the beginning of 2021. So that's good news. Tracy.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Syria is criticizing new U.S. sanctions for trying to, quote, starve the people of Syria. The foreign minister says the new penalties imposed by the United States are just the last weapon against Syria, but he does not expect them to be as bad as previous rounds of sanctions. The president of Tunisia says that there is no way his country will accept a divided Libya. Speaking in Paris alongside the French president, President Sayed said any government in neighboring Libya should be backed by the Libyan people. Libya has been divided since 2011 when the Obama administration led NATO to topple leader Muammar Gaddafi. Saudi Arabian officials say this year's Hajj pilgrimage will go ahead, but only a very few will be invited because of the coronavirus pandemic. The Hajj typically draws 2 million Muslims from around the world. This year, only foreigners who already live in Saudi Arabia will be allowed to participate. China has released some of its details of its new national security law, raising more fears that it's tightening its grip on Hong Kong. But the leader of Hong Kong says that it does not break the one country, two systems framework.
The authority of many of the things lies in the basic law. And this is the basic law that has given Hong Kong prosperity and stability in the past 23 years. It will continue to do so as long as we do not deviate from the basic law.
Carrie Lam, who refused to join the Communist Party so she could remain a Catholic, says the new national security law being imposed by Beijing is to restore stability in the former British colony. Mass testing continues in China after a huge spike in COVID-19 cases in the capital. There are long lines of people getting tested in Beijing today. Officials say they can test 300,000 people a day. So far, they have carried out almost 3 million tests in the capital and say about 250 people are infected with COVID-19. An elderly bishop of the underground church in China has been arrested again. Bishop Augustin Suicai was taken by Chinese officials to an unknown location last Friday. The 70-year-old bishop of Shuan Wuha has just been released from detention in January and has been under house arrest since 2007. The bishop has spoken out against the state-sponsored Catholic Church in China and was sent to a forced labor camp. The United States and British embassies to the Holy See held an event today to honor the women of religious. The online event honored the religious sisters who the embassies said are, quote, the unsung heroes of the Catholic Church. More than 200 people took part. They listened to religious sisters describe their work helping the needy in Ghana, Albania, and in Jerusalem. Joining us now from Rome is Sally Axworthy, British ambassador to the Holy See and co-host of the Women Religious on the Frontline Symposium. Ambassador, welcome back to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you.
So tell us, how did the event go and what struck you most about the messages that you heard?
So the event went well. In these times of coronavirus, we have to adapt how we work. So we ran this symposium online, which of course gave us the opportunity to hear from some sisters around the world. We had one sister who joined us from Tirana, one who joined us from Jerusalem. We had sisters dialing in from Africa. So it was really an event that sort of spanned the globe. And we had a good turnout, so that was great. I think the thing that struck me was we heard the sisters talking about their work, which is truly impressive. You know, we had a sister from Ghana who was talking about how she looks after children who might otherwise be at risk of being killed because they have birth defects, so she runs an orphanage for them. We had another sister from Tirana, Albania, who looks after women who've been trafficked and helps rehabilitate them. And then we had a sister who's based in Jerusalem, who they have a mission, I think, to the Bedouin tribes, but she was also talking about her work with her house in northern Italy, which had been very severely affected by coronavirus. So we got a bit of a kind of snapshot of some of the really good work that the sisters do.
I know U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Callista Gingrich, called women religious the unsung heroes of the Catholic Church. Do you agree with that statement?
I think I do, and that's why I wanted to be involved in this event. I've been ambassador to the Holy See for nearly 4 years now, and I think one of the great discoveries really coming here was of this huge army of people who are doing really wonderful work in the most difficult circumstances. So I think I'm right in saying there are about 650,000 religious sisters in the world, and you know, they're often running schools or running clinics in places that are dangerous, like South Sudan or in other conflict zones in Africa, and they go and they run those clinics and they don't leave when the circumstances get difficult. And we don't, in the mainstream media, we don't hear that much about them, but they're just doing a very good job helping people. And so we wanted to celebrate that a bit and recognise their work and say thank you as well.
Well, Ambassador, we have just about a minute left, but I'm curious, what type of support do the religious sisters receive? And if people would like to help, how can they do so?
So the religious sisters, they're very decentralized, which is one of the challenges. I mean, I think we did this event with the Union of International Superiors General, which is the umbrella body in Rome for female religious orders. And I think they have about 2,000 members. I mean, it is possible to channel help through them, through the UISG, or just to get in touch with individual religious orders, because a lot of them are global. You know, they operate in many, many countries. Today we heard from Sister Alicia, who is a Comboni sister, for example, and she told us that they work in 35 countries, including some of the poorest countries in the world. So I think the sisters need support. We also heard today a very kind of heartrending story from a sister in Nigeria who said that they're actually struggling to feed themselves. So, you know, I think they need people to help them, but I think it's a matter of reaching out to the individual orders.
Well, Ambassador, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. Sally Axworthy, British Ambassador to the Holy See. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Coming up, Catholic bishops in California say tearing down statues of St. Junípero Serra fails the test of history. Our California bishops are defending St. Junípero Serra, an 18th century Franciscan priest and missionary, after his statues were pulled down in both Los Angeles and in San Francisco. Protesters toppled the statue of Junípero Serra in Golden Gate Park over the weekend. The California Conference of Bishops says Serra actually defended the rights of Native Americans and says those that pulled down the statue, quote, failed the test of history. Joining us now on Skype to talk more about the life and legacy of St. Junípero Serra is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief of EWTN News. Matthew is also the author of the Encyclopedia of U.S. Catholic History. Matthew, welcome back to the show. So great to see you.
Always good to be with you. It's a privilege.
So tell us, for those who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about who St. Junípero Serra was?
Well, the title in some ways says it all. He was the Apostle of California. Through his work, and he arrived in California as a Franciscan missionary in his 50s, which is very late when we think about the lifespan of people in the 18th century. He helped establish 9 of the 21 missions that established the chain of the El Camino Real. In other words, the Royal Way, the great line of missions across all of California. He was there to evangelize, to proclaim Jesus Christ, to save souls. And in doing so, he also helped lay so much of the foundation of what we think of today as California. He can even be called sort of the father of California wine. because of the agricultural innovations that he and his Franciscans introduced. So California simply would not look anything like California today without him. But above all, he was a saint.
Well, Matthew, there seems to be some disagreement right now on his treatment of Native Americans. Can you talk about that and also how he is viewed by the biographers that studied his life?
Well, one of the things that we always have to be careful of when we're talking about historical figures is, and this is true in the study of history, especially from an academic standpoint, is that we need to understand the context, we need to understand the testimony of those at the time, and we need to understand the motivations of those that we're studying. In Serra's case, the more that we begin to appreciate his work, we can begin to understand more profoundly his efforts to protect the Native American peoples in California at a time of immense change in what became California. The great tides of colonialism were sweeping across that part of the world, and he was determined to do everything he could to protect the Native Americans, going so far as to walk from California to Mexico City to present to the viceroy there, the head of the Spanish colonies, a petition, basically the request for faculties that he could go back to California. He walked back to California in order to deal with the abuses of Native Americans on the part of colonial forces. Now, if we really appreciate Serra's work in this area, I think we have a much more fair understanding of what he tried to do, rather than to see this through an ideological lens that unfortunately is coloring so much of the discussion today.
We know that he helped to convert thousands of Native Californians to Christianity. Is there one thing that stands out to you about his dedication to the faith in the Catholic Church?
Well, there are a couple things. So the first is at the canonization ceremony in 2015, Pope Francis in Washington, D.C., made the point that Serra's motto was siempre adelante, always forward. And that is, in a way, a motto for Pope Francis as well, always going forward. And one of the things that we can see with Serra is he was walking, always going forward. And for Serra himself then, it was a desire to bring Christ to everyone. But he walked, as I said, but he did so on a very damaged leg. He had injured it shortly after arriving in Mexico City, and that plagued him for the rest of his life. So every step he took was filled with pain. But he did so out of genuine conviction of bringing Christ to the New World.
Oh, Matthew, we don't have much time left, but I know that you were actually at that canonization ceremony. Can you kind of give us a brief outlook of how it was that day, the feelings there, and also what you took away from it?
Well, to be present for any canonization is a unique experience for all of us. I have had the privilege of attending a number of them, including St. Damien of Molokai, Kateri Tekakwitha. This one was unique because it was here in the United States with Pope Francis in attendance. And I remember vividly the celebrations of the Native Americans there who understood what Serra had tried to do in his lifetime. And also how it was so important for Serra to bring Christ to the New World. That statue that was toppled in San Francisco over the weekend really says it all. An outstretched hand of blessing, holding a cross. It is a great loss to culture, to history, but it's a reminder of all of us to stay faithful to what Serra actually wanted to do.
Well, Matthew, indeed. And thank you so much. Always great speaking with you. Thank you for your insight. Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief of EWTN News. Thanks again, Matthew.
Great to be with you. God bless.
Up next, an archbishop from Florida is named the acting head of the USCCB Committee on Religious Liberty. The Archbishop of Miami is tapped to lead the U.S. Bishops' Committee for Religious Liberty. Archbishop Thomas Wenski takes over as the acting chairman of the committee following the death of Bishop George Murray earlier this month. Both Murray and Wenski received the same number of votes when they ran for the committee chairmanship last year. However, Wenski originally lost because he was 2 years younger than Murray.
As New York City's moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent expires for some people affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, Catholic Charities is warning that many low-income residents may soon find themselves without a place to live. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about this is Antonio Garcia, director of the Preserving Housing Program at Catholic Charities of New York. Antonio, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So can you give us a sense of how big of a problem this is or potentially could be, and the number of people that could be facing eviction?
Well, as you know, the New York City courts enacted a moratorium that expires in June 20th. And also the governor of New York enacted an order extending that moratorium for another 60 days until August the 20th. The good news is that last week, on Wednesday, the court actually extended the moratorium indefinitely, at least until July 7th. So the folks who are covered under the governor's moratorium, which expires August the 20th, will have to actually prove that they are receiving unemployment insurance benefits or receiving benefits, government benefits, and that they were impacted, or that they were impacted by COVID-19 and as a result suffer financial hardship. So what
Antonio,
we are seeing are that folks that are the ones that are going to be most impacted are the ones that are going to have a hard time proving that they suffer financial hardship due to COVID, and those who are not eligible to receive unemployment insurance benefits.
Antonio, what are you hearing from the people that you talk to, and what, if anything, I know you mentioned that the moratorium has been extended, but is there anything else the city or the state is doing to help people?
Well, in addition to the order that the governor enacted, there's also another moratorium that is pursuant to the Federal CARES Act, and that moratorium extends, it's through August the 25th. But that's only applicable to people who receive federal housing, including federal housing subsidies. What we're hearing from people is that they are afraid that come July 7th, these folks who had existing housing court cases for non-payment will be actually summoned to court, and some landlords will be able to get a warrant of eviction and have the marshal evict them after July 7th. So that is a possibility, and that's what people are afraid of.
So what is your organization, what is Catholic Charities of New York doing to help these people, especially those ones that seem to be falling through the cracks?
Well, people who want to contact Catholic Charities for assistance, and particularly those who are at imminent risk of eviction, can call the helpline of Catholic Charities, which is 888-744-7900. And we will give them an appointment to see a case manager. Now, we are actually right now conducting businesses virtually or remotely because of the pandemic, but we have some of our offices are open in case people cannot submit documentation via email. So calling the helpline is very important. People can also call the New York City Information and Referral line, which is 311, and they can also get guidance as to what they can do, including finding out legal representation in case they are not represented by counsel in housing court. We can also, at Catholic Charities, once a person is found eligible, we can provide emergency assistance to pay some of the rental arrears and emergency assistance for other issues that are affecting the person's housing stability.
Well, Antonio, thank you so much for coming on it and sharing all that with us. And thank you for what you're doing. Antonio Garcia, director of the Preserving Housing Program at Catholic Charities of New York. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tracy.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.